Welcome to the Decoding Innovation podcast series, brought to you by the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub, where we explore the innovative technologies, business models, and ideas that are shaping the future of industries. During each episode, Mitali Sharma, a principal in the EY Parthenon strategy practice, meets with stakeholders at the cutting edge to discuss innovations in their space, challenges they need to overcome, and their outlook on the future.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Mitali Sharma, and today we're talking to Greg Twinney. Greg is the CEO of General Fusion, a nuclear fusion company. In addition, Greg has the distinction of being part of leadership teams that built and commercialized for highly successful tech-enabled companies. Greg, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Greg, would you mind sharing with our audience your journey so far and your background?
Sure. Be glad to. So currently I'm the CEO of General Fusion, but I've spent the last almost 25 years now in the technology sector, not deep tech, but in disruptive tech. And started my career in the late 1990s in disruptive tech, which back then was building websites in the .com days. It was part of a company that ultimately became one of the largest public companies building websites right up until the .com bubble burst in about 2001. So that's when I got my first introduction into technology disruption. It was back in the .com, and found that being part of an organization that is disrupting industry is a really exciting thing to do, and it really helps to build a community internally when you are really trying to make a big dent in something that currently exists. And back then, building websites at the time meant that physical commerce was going to change completely. And for us, that was the big challenge, was building websites in a way that would absolutely disrupt physical commerce. From there, I moved on to another company that was focused on disrupting large data centers. And back in the day, I guess in the mid-2000s, there were large data centers being run by banks and insurance companies in a way that currently they aren't. So this was before cloud computing. And those data centers required thousands of people to maintain and monitor all the servers. And so I partnered up back then with a founder who had developed a technology for being able to monitor, maintain, and oversee many servers, much like a virtual robot, basically. And he wanted to bring that to market. Of course, being a highly technical person, he had the technical capabilities to do that, but didn't have the business expertise to be able to take an idea and turning it into an actual business. So I joined the company and joined him, and together we built the company from an idea through to a large-scale business, monitoring, maintaining, overseeing large data centers. So that was my second company, sort of disrupting an industry as well. Third company was a company called Kobo, an e-reading company. And back in 2009, e-reading was not mainstream. And so we were looking to disrupt the physical book industry. We had the bold ambition of being the largest ebook company in the world, and believed that by doing that, we'd be able to bring books to people globally, many that currently don't have access to books, and also to allow people to have sort of libraries of books in their pockets. And so we set up out on that mission in 2009, built the company over the course of 4 or 5 years, and ultimately had the largest ebook company in the world, and working with booksellers around the world in order to do that, and disrupted that industry in a big way, and ultimately were purchased by a large e-commerce company. The next company after Kobo that I was a part of was a company called Real Matters. That company was looking to disrupt the mortgage appraisal industry, which to me was a brand new industry, much like the prior two companies that I was a part of. I was unfamiliar with the industry when I joined. However, I recognized the opportunity in terms of market size and inefficiencies in the existing industry, and said, I want to be a part of disrupting this industry as well. And so that company was focused on mainly in the US, when you need to refinance your mortgage or get a new mortgage, you always have to get an appraisal. So anything that touches the house's equity as a means for security requires an appraisal. And it was a very inefficient process in the US, with large banks having to reach out to physical appraisers on a daily basis in the thousands every day, and organize appraisals and get them back from appraisers and all of that. And so Real Matters, what we did was inserted ourselves in that process to be an intermediary between the bank and these independent physical appraisers of homes. And what that allowed us to do was almost be like an Uber of appraisals, in that when a bank needed to do an appraisal at a particular location, they would contact us, Real Matters, and we would go and find the best appraiser, organize that, interface with the appraiser, handle all of the billing and all of the back and forth and the Q&A and all of these things to ensure that the bank got an appraisal on time, as expected, and at the quality they expected. And so we inserted ourselves there, and we're doing thousands of appraisals per day, and that company continues to exist and has expanded their product portfolio since then. But we took the company public in 2014 and was a pretty successful IPO on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So again, entering into another new industry, one that I was less familiar with, but partnering with a founder who has a strong technical background and deep understanding of an industry, and really using my business expertise to help them along on that journey. And so that's been the recurring theme in my career, is partnering up with founders who have strong technology backgrounds, but need the partnership on the business side to do a lot of the remaining pieces. And that's the common thread that I've been bringing to all of these companies time after time.
Greg, thanks for sharing that. If we were to think about your background and the commonality around it, disruption comes across very, very strongly. Would you mind sharing with our audience your view on disruptive innovation?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's interesting because when I reflect on my career, or even just describing it to you now, it comes across as though I have set out on a journey to disrupt industries, which is actually not a conscious decision that I made, 20 plus years ago when I got into technology. In fact, it's been just probably something more related to being on a mission that it really matters, and it drives me and motivates me in a way that I want to put everything into a particular endeavor. And so when I'm looking at opportunities and looking at places to spend my time, it's had to always have a very, very strong why. Do I think I'm going to be able to make a major impact in this industry and with this business in doing that? And so I think that's why I have bounced between several different disruptive industries and still been successful, is because I can recognize an industry that is appealing to me and an opportunity that's appealing to me, and that I can make an impact in that particular company before I make the decision to actually go on the journey.
In each of these cases, you said you started working with the person or people who had the original idea.
Yes.
Could you walk us a little bit around your thought process as you were trying to take that idea and commercialize it?
Yeah, it's it's really interesting to me when I talk to entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, perhaps, who are just getting started. And often they are thinking about the idea as being the secret sauce, or the thing. They don't want to share their idea with anybody because they're afraid someone else will steal it. I actually have a very different thought process around that. And it's my personal opinion, is that the idea doesn't really matter all that much. That's not the secret, because there's no real wall around an idea. In my career, the wall that gets created is all about execution. and taking that idea and turning it into something that can be executed, and then moving it forward every single day, week, month, quarter, year, to ultimately keeping your eye on that goal of why did you start this in the beginning, and making sure that everything you're doing is aimed at that. And so for me, it's all about the execution of a great idea and a great technology, more so than actually the technology or the idea itself.
So once you figured out that the idea has potential,
Mm.
when do you know the scope of the disruptive potential? Do you start with that, or do you discover it as you go along?
Yeah, for me, I start with that, and I'll go back to, I do a lot of mentoring of young entrepreneurs trying to get into a new industry or start a new company, and often the question that I ask them to ask themselves is, if you are successful here and it's a home run and you get 50% market share in this particular industry that you're trying to disrupt, what does that mean? And is it going to matter? And often what comes out of that is people reflecting on their idea and how they're thinking about things, and realizing that even if they hit a home run, it's still too small. The business is going to be too small, and it's not really disrupting on a large enough scale. So I often think about the opportunity upfront in terms of, what does a home run look like? And what's that outcome that I want to have in 5 years? And for me, it has been kind of a 5-year timeline in getting a handle on that at the outset, more than dive in and then figure it out later.
When you're trying to build a new business, you have to pivot sometimes.
Yes.
And it's hard. Pivoting is always hard. What are some of the signals that the market gives you back? And if you can rely on your experience and give us insight into when you did that and how you did that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because it is a bit of an art form to know when you're getting traction and when you need to realize that you're not getting traction, and you may not get traction. You need to pivot. But often what I've found is an important indicator early on is finding a partner of some sort inside the industry. And this has been throughout pretty much every company, is finding somebody in the industry who will acknowledge that what you're doing can be very disruptive and very valuable to the industry if you can do it. And then having them actually partner or participate in some way, in a way that they may not be putting capital into your company, but they're spending time and resources helping you be successful in one way or the other. And so because I don't want to swear on the podcast, I had a board investor in 2008 when we were trying to bring one of my companies to market. And what he said was, you need to find a partner that gives a SHIT, and that will show you that. And what he meant by that is that they are going to put the time and energy to understand what it is that we're doing, and help us and bring us along. So if you can't find people that want to pull you along and you're having to push your way in, I find that is often an early indicator that if you're having to push and no one's pulling you along or interested in helping you pull along, you might have an issue.
So can you give us an example of what that might mean for the e-reader company or any of the other companies that you worked with?
Yeah, so for the e-reader company, it's a good one, because our entire model was built on partnerships. We were building we built the largest content platform in the world of ebooks, so the most number of ebooks available, and we're building e-readers. But we needed a channel in order to sell these e-readers and engage customers. And so what we did was we went around the world and partnered with the #1 bookseller in every single country. And, starting within Canada, Indigo. And then, as we moved our way around the world, we found #1 bookseller and connected with them and said, look, we want to sell our product and our books to your customers. We'll share with you in the in the fruits of all of that, and your customers will be able to access ebooks in a way that they currently can't. And that was a major defining moment for us as a company, was recognizing that the people that we needed to care were the current and existing sort of book selling companies. And that pulled us through in a huge way. And so it's really interesting because they could have looked at us as a threat because we were ebook company and they were a book selling company. And so they had to shift their mindset to recognize that this type of disruption is going to happen, and it will be good for their customers ultimately, and therefore they should participate in it. So that fueled us. And when we started the company, there were probably about 150 other ebook companies starting in around that time frame, as it was sort of a sort of hot time to be starting an ebook company. And this strategy of finding a partner is what allowed us to become the largest one in the world.
Yeah, what you're talking about is convening an ecosystem that is specifically geared towards what you're trying to achieve. What I found very interesting is the fact that you were disrupting the industry and partnering with the same industry. So often in those times, what you had said earlier is very relevant, that the inventor is hesitant to part with the idea because then the incumbent could take that idea and run with it.
Yes.
How did you get over that hurdle?
This goes back to something I was talking about earlier, which was in order to disrupt the physical book industry, you would need to build something that is pretty incredible. Books have been around for a while. The expectation when you grab a book off the shelf is that it always works. It's always there. And so you need to build something pretty incredible to disrupt physical book industry. In order to build something that big, you would need to invest a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of expertise. And these partners that we made were not able to do that on their own because even if they could, their market, so think about the largest bookseller in Italy, if they were to go and spend the resources required to build something that will disrupt books, for them, they wouldn't get the return in their country alone. They would need to be a global company. And so our approach was, we will build something that is going to be incredible, something that wouldn't be economically viable in just one country, but will need to be global. And so that was allowing these individual booksellers around the world to join this in a way that they couldn't build this themselves.
When you start thinking about product development as a CEO or part of the C-suite, how soon should companies think about building a platform versus one product?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I would say that ultimately it goes back to that question of what is your end in mind? If your end in mind is to disrupt the ebook industry, as an example, perhaps you're going to start with just building out the catalog of books and selling it to people who have their own e-reader of some sort. But you need to be focused on ultimately what the end goal is. You need to have a path to this sort of bigger disruption play. Otherwise, what you're building will not be appealing and scalable. So if you're building just one piece of the product, like we did it at Kobo with our catalog, we knew that ultimately that would plug into a platform for e-reading. It wasn't built on its own and depending on somebody else.
No problem. As you built these companies, scaled them, and in some cases exited with IPOs, what has surprised you in this journey?
What surprises me often is the stories that get told on the other side of it, including me telling these stories, because they often come across as these very well thought out, linearly growing and progressing adventures in business. And people look at you and say, wow, like you you had all the force, you were able to see the path and you understood it. Often that's not in reality the way that it works. It's very messy and very iterative, and there are lots and lots of moments where you are uncertain whether you're going to be able to carry on because your competitor comes in, or you're out of capital, or your biggest investor has bailed on you because they've got their own problems, or all of these types of things. And I think it's really misleading for others that are looking to get into disruptive industries or even start their own business in some way, because it kind of sets a bit of an expectation that that it should be straightforward. And if you hit these walls, well, good companies, they didn't do that. Like their story was straight up and to the right, right? And even you at the beginning of our podcast made a comment that been this sort of string of successful companies, but it's been like close. And every single company that's been successful, I would say there have been multiple times where it was uncertain whether we're going to make it to the next stage. I always feel compelled to try and share the reality of how it actually unfolded versus the romantic story of how it'd be nice to tell the story of the up and to the right, but it's just not the reality.
A lot of innovation and disruption tends to come from entrepreneurial world, fringe of the main industry. Why do you think big companies cannot disrupt as frequently or as well in most cases? There are exceptions.
Yeah. I think there's probably a bunch of reasons for that. Often it's too much to lose, in my opinion, when I see big companies that I've disrupted in coming, out of nowhere with a startup have been companies that have too much to lose. So there's a real opportunity cost to stopping doing what they're doing in order to do something new that's very high risk, because they're either making profits and revenues, and their stock is based on the inertia that they've built. And so when you're going to take resources off of this near term and apply it to a very high risk venture, the opportunity cost is very high. Whereas if you're a startup, you're not giving up anything else. This is it. Generally, what I see is in startups, early stage startups, 50 or less people, you are usually attracting individuals who want a mission and don't want to, not necessarily just a job, and that they also have a higher level of risk tolerance, I would say. So maybe it's a combination of those couple of things.
Very fascinating. What you said was very true. One of the things is that comfort with ambiguity, comfort with risk, and then attracting people who are comfortable with it. So that's a fascinating answer. Do you think big companies could somehow maybe change their structure in a way, or they could learn from the entrepreneurs of the world to bring some of that in-house?
It seems as though big companies are going to continue to struggle with that, in my opinion, and that's why I think you see big companies acquire small companies that are doing the things that are going to disrupt their industry, or that an industry that they want to get into, because they recognize that even internal incubators and carving out budgets for separate innovation, I just don't think you get all of the ingredients that you get in a startup that is hanging it all out there and doing it all on their own. And that is a really unique experience without a safety net. It drives you in a different way than being inside of a larger company.
Fascinating. One more thing. When you're building a team, it's hard to figure out when to scale up. Some companies scale up too fast. Some don't scale up fast enough, and both are dangerous. Tell us about your experience in that area.
That's a tricky one too. There isn't a real formula for it, but it's a real fine balance of keeping the team stretching and growing as it is before you go and add additional resources but you don't want to stretch people to the point where they burn out and it's not sustainable longer term. But I would say that in all of the companies, there have been these real moments of discomfort throughout the organization as we go through these growing pains, and often the growth is happening in the companies I've been a part of has usually pulled us to have to expand the team, and we haven't tried to anticipate the growth and hire too far in advance. And so that creates some discomfort because you've got a team that's probably executing beyond its bandwidth at certain periods. And I have always felt that is more likely to succeed than sort of overbuilding too soon. So perhaps there's a bit of an opportunity cost there, and that you may miss some of the some opportunities because you haven't staffed up and can't take advantage of it. But if you're playing the long game, you eventually will catch up that as you grow.
Greg, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time today, and good luck with everything we'll be watching.
Thank you for having me.
On December 13th, 2022, U.S. Department of Energy and National Nuclear Security Administration announced the achievement of fusion ignition at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. This podcast episode was recorded prior to that announcement.
The Decoding Innovation podcast series is a limited production of the EY Nottingham Spurk Innovation Hub based in Cleveland, Ohio. For more information, visit our website at ey.com/decodinginnovation. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to spread the word.